And the Obama administration has condemned the release by a politically active website, Wikileaks, of more than 90,000 classified documents to the New York Times and other newspapers. The site's founder says it is just the beginning. He plans to post thousands more files in coming weeks. NBC News Chief Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski joins us. What do you think of the bottom line here? A lot we knew about, but a lot is very, very damaging, both diplomatically and, of course, to the troops and to the war effort.
Well, Andrea, what these documents that were leaked, some 92,000 of them, a staggering amount. Give us a more detailed account and confirmation about some of the problems that everybody had suspected or were quite evident all along. What's raised the most interest here in the Washington area, of course, is the claims within these documents, evidence, if you would, that some members and former members of the Pakistani intelligence service and the military were not only encouraging but supporting the Taliban in their attacks on Afghan and U.S. military forces inside Afghanistan. What is interesting, however, while Washington is focused on that aspect of the documents, in a news conference with Julian Assange, who is the founder of Wikileaks in London today, the discussion there was all about war crimes. And in fact, Assange has said that was in part the driving force behind his publishing these leaked documents in trying to, what he said, essentially change or, I suspect, end the course of the war there in Afghanistan. Andrea?
Mick, is the Pentagon pushing back hard against these allegations of war crimes?
Well, you know, they're not actually. They're going to take their time, and they say it could take days or weeks before they pore over all of these documents to determine what is real, what is hypothetical, and what is just plain false. So they're not jumping into any conclusions here about the documents themselves. They, too, of course, are condemning the release, as National Security Advisor Jim Jones did, in fact claiming that it puts American men and women on the ground, Afghan forces, and something more importantly, some of the local Afghans who may be cooperating with the Americans at greater risk now that these documents have been released.
And Mick, of course, this comes at a time when the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and others are beginning to question the war strategy, as well as people like Richard Hawes, whom we interviewed last week from the Council on Foreign Relations. This creates big problems for the White House. And as we speak of the White House, Mick, let's go to Robert Gibbs, who is expected to be asked about all of this today.
Speaking of the White House.
News organizations that these stories were coming. Look, I think our reaction to this type of material, a breach of federal law, is always the same, and that is whenever you have the potential for names and for operations and for programs to be out there in the public domain, that it, besides being against the law, has a potential to be very harmful to those that are in our military, those that are cooperating with our military, and those that are working to keep us safe.
Well, I mean, was he personally angered by this? Did he demand answers? Or
well, there is an ongoing investigation that predated the end of last week into leaks of highly classified secret documents.
Does the White House believe that the documents raise doubts about whether Pakistan is a reliable partner in fighting terrorism?
Well, let's understand a few things about the documents. Based on what we've seen, I don't think that what is being reported hasn't in many ways been publicly discussed either by you all or by representatives of the U.S. government for quite some time. We have certainly known about safe havens in Pakistan. We have been concerned about civilian casualties for quite some time, and on both of those aspects, we've taken steps to make improvements. I think just the last time General Petraeus testified in front of the Senate, there was a fairly robust discussion about the historical relationships that have been had between the Taliban and Pakistan's intelligence services.
So no doubts about Pakistan's trustworthiness or reliability?
No, look, I think the president was clear back in March of 2009 that there was no blank check for Pakistan, that Pakistan had to change the way it dealt with us. It had to make progress on safe havens. Look, it's in the interest of the Pakistanis, because we certainly saw last year those extremists that enjoyed a safe haven there turning their eye on innocent Pakistanis. That's why you've seen Pakistan make progress in moving against extremists in Swat and in South Waziristan. But at the same time, even as they make progress, we understand that the status quo is not acceptable and that we have to continue moving this relationship in the right direction.
One more quick one on this. What do you think this says about the ability of the government to protect confidential information from breach like this can occur?
Well, look, I think there's no doubt that this is a concerning development in operational security. As we said earlier, it poses a very real and potential threat to those that are working hard every day to keep us safe.
I wanted to ask you quickly about Congressman Rangel and the ethics charges that he faces. Is it the preference of the White House that he reach a deal and put this behind him, put it behind the party?
Ben, I don't have anything on that. I've been focused on the Wikileaks.
You worry that it would be a distraction if it carries on to September?
I don't. Let me get some information.
On the Wikileaks, one of the questions that this raises is whether it makes sense for the United States to continue to give billions of dollars of aid to Pakistan if they are helping the Taliban. And I'm wondering if that is a concern and what you think.
Well, again, as I said a minute ago, on March 27, 2009, the President said, after years of mixed results, we will not and cannot provide a blank check. Pakistan must demonstrate its commitment to rooting out al-Qaeda and the violent extremists within its borders. Again, I am not going to stand here on July the 26th and tell you that all is well. I will tell you that we have made progress in moving this relationship forward, in having the Pakistanis, as I said earlier, address the issue of safe havens, the issue of extremists operating in that country by undertaking operations again in Swat and in South Waziristan, because over the course of the past more than year and a half, what the Pakistanis have found is that the extremists that once enjoyed complete safe haven in parts of their country now threaten their country. So they've taken steps. We want to continue to work with them to take more steps. We understand that we are in this region of the world because of what happened on 9/11, that ensuring that there is not a safe haven in Afghanistan by which attacks against this country and countries around the world can be planned. That's why we're there, and that's why we're going to continue to make progress on this relationship.
A blank check is one thing, but is there enough progress there to justify the aid that is being given to them?
Again, look, I think it was, even if you look at some of the comments the Secretary of State made just last week in Pakistan, and you know, our criticism has been relayed both publicly and privately, and we will continue to do so in order to move this relationship forward.
And I know you're unhappy about the leak, but could you talk about how that part of the issue is characterized in the memos and whether you think it's accurate?
Which,
in terms of Pakistan's role?
Look, again, I would point you to, as I said a minute ago, I don't know that what is being said or what is being reported isn't something that hasn't been discussed fairly publicly, again, by named U.S. officials and in many news stories. I mean, the New York Times had a story on this topic in March of 2009, written by the same authors.
Okay, shifting gears, Also want to ask you where things stand with the consumer regulator decision. How soon is the president going to make a decision?
Yeah, I don't have an update on the timeline from last week in which I said I did not think that things were immediate. I know that the president will look at this job and the several other jobs that are created as part of this legislation and make an announcement.
And what criteria is he going to be looking at? I know you don't want to talk publicly about the strengths and weaknesses of the candidates.
Well,
but
look, I think we've got a number of, as we've talked about here, and with many of you on the phone, I think we've got many good candidates. And again, I think if you look back at the reason that the president and the team wanted to create a bureau that dealt with consumer